You were never tested for the right thing. There's a $30 blood test that changes everything you've been told about your diagnosis. And by the end of this file, you'll know exactly what to ask your doctor at your next appointment. You've been told you have so-called insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. Your blood work comes back. Your doctor says normal. You feel anything but that. That gap between what the results say and what your body is telling you is not in your head. It's in what was never tested. Tonight, 12 published receipts. Here's the case in full before we even open the file. The villain, the name, so-called insulin resistance, was chosen in 1936 by a doctor watching his needle, not asking what the cell was experiencing. The cell was protecting itself, but it was named the disease. The victim, your cells. A dietary flood funded in 1967 by a sugar industry bribe directed every guideline towards carbs, and your body's protective response to that flood was named the diagnosis. The cover-up, a $30 test that's been published in the peer-reviewed literature since 1975, showing the pattern behind every vascular complication, every cardiovascular diagnosis, every case of type 2 diabetes, absent from every national clinical guide on earth. And what you'll also get is 8 questions that compel a factual answer from any doctor, a 90-day repair map, and 4 doors into repair, not management. And 1 bonus receipt I have saved for last. I want to make sure you stay until the end. Before the first receipt, you need the evidence map. You cannot exit a system using a map designed by the people who profit from your confusion. Stop this video now, go to the link in the description box and download your free 90-day cellular repair guide. You'll also find it on my website. Open it to section 1, page 5. The investigation doesn't move forward until you have your map. So 12 receipts plus 1 bonus I've saved for last. All peer-reviewed, all in the public record, all available for everybody that manages your diagnosis. So let's open the file. Receipt number 1. In 1936, a doctor named Harold Himsworth published a paper in the Lancet. He was watching insulin responses in patients with diabetes. He noticed some patients responded to insulin and some didn't. He named the ones who did not respond insulin resistant. He was looking at his needle. He wasn't asking what the cell was experiencing. He wasn't asking why the cell had reduced its response. He named what he observed from the outside. Now, if your circuit breaker trips, you don't call the circuit breaker electricity resistant. You ask what overloaded the circuit. Himsworth named the gate. 90 years of treatment designed to force it back open. Nobody asked why it closed. Receipt number 2. In 1967, the Sugar Research Foundation paid 3 Harvard scientists the equivalent of $50,000 in today's money to publish a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine clearing sugar of any role in cardiovascular disease and blaming animal fat. The funding was hidden, the paper was published, and for 50 years, dietary guidelines built on that paper sent the world away from fat and towards carbohydrates, toward a pattern that chronically elevated insulin. The flood was funded, and the body's protective response to that flood was named the disease. Receipt number 3. In 1988, Gerald Reaven delivered the Banting Lecture, the highest honour in diabetes medicine. He called his lecture Syndrome X. He documented the cluster he named, so-called insulin resistance, high triglycerides, low LDL, elevated blood pressure, increased cardiovascular risk, all driven by one upstream cause, chronically elevated insulin. And Reaven, he called for fasting insulin tests to be standard. It wasn't added to any guideline. Receipt number 4. In 2006, Peterson and Shulman published the definitive mechanism for why the cell closes its doors. It's called intramyocellular lipid accumulation. That's the fat inside muscle cells. It disrupts the insulin signaling cascade at specific enzyme sites. The cell's not broken, it's just overwhelmed. And the cell responds the only way it can. It reduces its response to the signal, telling it to absorb more glucose. Your cell was protecting itself. The name insulin resistance makes it sound like your cell is the problem. Receipt number 5. Joseph Kraft, in 1975, studied 14,384 patients. He ran a 5-hour glucose and insulin challenge on every patient. He didn't just measure glucose, he measured insulin. His finding, 3/4 of the patients with completely normal fasting glucose were already showing abnormal insulin response patterns. The disease was already there. The standard test couldn't see it. He called that diabetes in situ. It's present, but invisible to glucose measurement alone. This paper's been available since 1975. Fasting insulin is not on your standard blood panel. Receipt number 6. In 2008, Michael Brown and Joseph Goldstein, 2 Nobel Prize winners, published in Cell Metabolism. They found something your doctor was never taught. Insulin sends your liver 2 separate instructions. Instruction 1, stop releasing glucose into the blood. Instruction 2, take that sugar and turn it into fat for storage. When your liver gets overloaded, it stops obeying instruction 1. Sugar keeps pouring into your blood sugar keeps climbing, but funny enough, it keeps obeying instruction 2. Fat keeps getting manufactured, stored. Your triglycerides keep rising. Think of it like a security guard who stops answering the fire alarm, but he keeps still locking all the exits. One signal ignored, one signal followed. Same building, same guard. This is why your blood sugar climbed and your triglycerides climb at the same time. Not from the fat you ate. Your liver manufactured those triglycerides from the carbohydrates you were told to eat more of. 2 Nobel Prize winners documented this in 2008. It's not in your standard blood test. Receipt number 7. Your muscle cells have what we call GLUT4 transporters. When insulin is elevated, these GLUT4 receptors move to the surface. When the cell is full, it stops. That's the self-protective mechanism we've been discussing. Your blood vessel cells, your endothelial cells, don't have GLUT4. They have GLUT1 receptors. GLUT1 has no circuit breaker. It absorbs glucose proportional to what arrives, regardless of how much is already inside the cell. Your blood vessels can't protect themselves from a glucose flood. So every year of chronically elevated glucose and insulin, your vessel walls were absorbing continuously. What happens next is well documented. Diabetic retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy, the burning in your feet at 3 in the morning. Every vascular complication follows this pathway. Receipt number 8. In 2009, in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, Dr. Mark Gunter and colleagues studied 14,525 postmenopausal women. It was a prospective case cohort study. Their finding? Postmenopausal women not using hormone therapy in the highest fasting insulin quartile had 2.4 times higher breast cancer incidence compared to women in the lowest fasting insulin quartile. This is an association from a prospective study, not proven causation, but it is peer-reviewed, published in a major journal, and available in the public record. Fasting insulin hasn't been added to standard breast cancer risk assessment. Receipt number 9. Professor Jimmy Bell, Imperial College London, did MRI imaging studies. He found normal BMIs, normal waist circumference, but approximately 45% of the individuals scanned had excessive internal fat around the organs, infiltrating the liver, surrounding the pancreas. He called it TOFI, thin inside, fat outside, invisible to scales, invisible to BMI, invisible to waist measurement, but driven by chronically elevated insulin, the fat storage hormone, depositing fat where it can't be seen and where it does the most damage. Receipt number 10. The American Diabetes Association Standards of Medical Care in Diabetes, 2025 edition, shows fasting insulin not included in routine diagnostic criteria. The Royal Australian College of General Practitioners Management of Type 2 Diabetes, 2024, fasting insulin not in standard diagnostics. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE 2G28, Type 2 Diabetes in Adults Management, 2022, fasting insulin not required. Receipt number 11. In 1953, Ancel Keys published a graph linking fat consumption to heart disease mortality across 6 countries. But the problem is he had data from 22 countries and only presented 6. These were the 6 countries that fit his hypothesis. Yerushalmi and Hillabo, 2 biostatisticians, published a direct rebuttal in 1957 showing that when all 22 countries were included, the relationship Keys claimed disappeared entirely. That rebuttal was largely ignored. The 6-country graph became the foundation of 50 years of low-fat dietary guidelines. The dietary patterns Keyes promoted in those selected countries, later popularised as the so-called blue zone regions, were catalogued through the same selective lens. They weren't independently validated, they were consistent with his pre-existing hypothesis. The connection between Keyes, the sugar industry funding that you saw in receipt number 2, and the dietary guidelines that shaped clinical practice for half a century is a file within a file. That investigation is coming. Receipt number 12, the 2012 Archives of Internal Medicine, where Culver and colleagues studied 153,840 postmenopausal women in the Women's Health Initiative. They followed these women over the study period and found that women taking statins were between 48 and 71% more likely to be newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The 71% was the unadjusted figure, the raw number. After adjusting for factors like BMI, the increased risk came down to 48%. The absolute risk increase was small, but it was consistent, peer-reviewed, and statistically significant. The study also noted this: fasting insulin was never measured in these women, so researchers couldn't confirm exactly how the statin triggered the metabolic shift. Did it affect how sensitive the cells were to insulin? Did it affect the pancreas? The mechanism couldn't be identified. Why? Because the one measurement that would have answered the question was not taken. Fast forward to today, a woman who's prescribed a statin, her LDL drops. A few years later, she's told she has type 2 diabetes. She's told it's a new development. Her fasting insulin was never measured at prescription. Ask your doctor whether this finding was part of your prescription discussion. Now here's your bonus receipt. In 1997, a committee at the American Diabetes Association moved the fasting glucose threshold from 140 to 126. That's 14 points. That is all. But overnight, because of that one change, twice as many people in the world qualified as diabetic. Not because the disease got worse, not because the biology changed, the line just moved. The population doubled. But here's what that report didn't contain: a single conflict of interest disclosure. None were required. We don't know who was paying the people who drew that line, but what we do know, a peer-reviewed study found that 75% of guideline panel members who expanded disease definition had pharmaceutical industry ties. A separate audit found 48% of ADA guideline authors received industry payments, around $33,000 a year. Even Coca-Cola once sponsored a session at an ADA convention on the role of sugar in diabetes. Fasting insulin was still not added to the criteria. The test Kraft ran on 14,000 patients, absent again. Okay, now you've just seen 12 receipts and the bonus receipt showing what went wrong, how it went wrong, and who benefited from it staying wrong. The receipts tell you what was hidden. Now I want to show you what happened inside your body as a result and why it's still happening. In other words, I want to show you the mechanism of what is happening as a consequence of a normal response to blood sugar being ignored. Not in medical language, in real terms. Okay, so your blood vessel cells have no circuit breaker. They absorb what arrives, remember that? When insulin is chronically elevated, glucose arrives in excess. The vessel cells absorb glucose continuously. What happens now operates 3 pathways. The first pathway, glucose binds to the proteins in your vessel walls and hardens them like caramel setting in a pan. These are called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs for short. The glucose fused permanently onto your tissue. The body can't easily break them down. That hardening accumulates with every year the flooding continues. The second pathway, free radical formation. That's like chemical corrosion from inside the vessel wall. And the third pathway, the immune repair crew floods in and does the job, but the damage signal never stops. So the repair material keeps layering, keeps thickening, keeps hardening. That's what appears in pathology as a plaque, as diabetic retinopathy, as nephropathy, as neuropathy, the burning in your feet at 3 a.m, cardiovascular disease, every vascular complication from this single mechanism. Now, medicine looked at the cells that closed their doors and named the closed doors the disease. The blood vessels, the actual victims, were listed as complications. Okay, so you've seen the 12 receipts and the 3 pathways to disease. Now you need the 8 subpoenas before we get to the 4 doors and your next steps. These aren't requests, they're questions to compel a factual answer. Write them down, take them to your next appointment. Subpoena 1. Has a fasting insulin test ever been ordered for me? If not, ask why. The evidence for why it's missing is in receipt 10. Go back and look. Has OMA-IR ever been calculated? That's the so-called insulin resistance score. It needs 2 numbers, glucose and fasting insulin. If your fasting insulin's never been ordered, it can't be calculated. Receipt 3 tells you why that matters. Subpoena 3. What are my fasting triglycerides and how have they trended over the last few years? Ask for the trend. 1 number tells you where you are now. 3 years tells you where you're going. Receipt 6 explains the connection. Subpoena 4. Has my C-peptide ever been measured? It tells you whether your pancreas is overproducing insulin or running out. These 2 situations look identical on a glucose test and require opposite approaches. Receipt 5 shows you why. Subpoena 5. Has my insulin response pattern ever been assessed? There are 5 patterns. Most people have never been checked against any of them. If your doctor can't answer, go back to receipt 5. Subpoena 6. Are statins linked to a significantly increased risk of new onset diabetes? And is my fasting insulin measured before I start statins? If not, go back to receipt 12 to remember why that matters. Subpoena 7. Has my fasting insulin ever been looked at as part of my cancer risk? This is a documented association, remember, in the peer-reviewed literature. It's not on any standard screen. The evidence is in receipt 8. Subpoena 8. Where did the number 126 come from? And has anyone checked if it's still right? Now, these aren't tricky questions. They're not confrontational. They're the questions of someone who wants to understand their own diagnosis. You absolutely have a right to know where the line that classified you came from. Now, which of these 8 questions are you most nervous to ask your doctor? Tell me in the comments. I'm looking for the most common roadblock so I can film a guide on exactly how to handle the pushback. The 4 doors. Now I want to give you a solution that matches exactly where you are right now. Open your guide to section 8. Your rank from this moment forward is Sherlock, a sovereign detective who masters their own biology to solve their metabolic case. Here are your 4 doors, your next steps. Door 1, go to the 90-day reset scorecard on page 10 of your guide. Rate each area from 1 to 10. Do it weekly. Stop guessing what's wrong. Start tracking it. That's where you build the evidence base for your own case file. Or door 2, the acceleration pathway. Go to page 13, click on the link. It's called the Cellular Repair Support. This is where you add clinical stem cell nutrition to your repair environment. It is phase 2 of the terrain restoration. Phase 1 removes the flood, clears the interference. Phase 2 repairs what the flood damaged. It's called the rebuild foundation. It's the vessel wall, the receptor sites, the AGE burden your blood vessel cells have been carrying. This isn't available at a pharmacy. It's not in the standard of care. It's the only protocol I know of that targets phase 2 specifically. It's on page 13. Door 3, the private case review. Click my booking link in the description to have a reset conversation with me directly. This is for you if you recognize yourself in the evidence today, but you really don't know where to start. Or if you've tried everything and nothing has held. We go through your blood work, your history, your specific picture, not population averages, your data. If your doctor can't answer the subpoenas, that's exactly why door 3 exists. I look at the data they ignore. So book a case review using my booking link in the description box below. We don't monitor, we repair. And finally, door 4, next Tuesday, the synthetic insulin trap. If tonight proved that the diagnosis was built on a naming fraud, next week we open the file on what the prescription was built on. If so-called insulin resistance was the wrong name for what your cell was doing, what was the drug designed to treat? Subscribe, the next file drops Tuesday. So we saw the 12 receipts plus the bonus receipt, all published, all in the public record, all available to everybody that manages your diagnosis. The name was chosen in 1936, the flood was funded in 1967, the threshold was moved in 1997, but the test that would have changed all of this has been absent from every clinical guideline for 50 years. Your body wasn't resisting, it was protecting. Download the guide, take the subpoenas to your next appointment, and if your doctor can't answer them, that is also a receipt. I'm Nineveh Daniel, a cellular detective. This file is closed, but the case continues. I'll see you in the next one.